and I'm still bike racing. I'm 50 years old, post-menopausal, yay for the post-menopausal. And I'm still bike racing.
Hey, Empowered Vegan Lifers, Ella here with my co-host. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Ella. You're in Virginia, aren't you?
I sure am. Did you see how I got a little accent?
Yeah.
All of a sudden? I am. Is that right? I don't know. I was born in the South, but Chapel Hill it's kind of like a little island in North Carolina, super liberal, and there were vegetarians back in like the 80s there. And so we're a little different there. But my grandmother had the cutest Southern accent, and I miss her voice. It was so cute.
Oh,
yeah. But yes, I'm in Virginia at the sanctuary for several weeks. And it's cold. And we're not going to talk about the weather because I could complain about that forever. And I'm decided this year I'm not going to complain.
Wow. I think that's a great idea. I think I'll jump on that bandwagon with you.
Right. I know somebody, what's funny. I'm not going to say names, but somebody I know, my mother talks about, okay, so I am kind of saying her name, but I'm not going to say the other person's name. She talks about seeing this other person that she sees a lot often. And she said that every time they see each other, the other person must be very uncomfortable because the first thing they start talking about is the weather. And I was like, oh, you're probably just being, silly, sensitive. Well, now that she said it, every time I'm around and that person's there, that person starts with the weather. And it really is something that I don't want to do on this podcast anymore.
Yeah, that is so... that is kind of a Midwestern nicety. We always start with the weather. It's our icebreaker. But I have found I have fallen into that very often. Weather's constant. So
it is. The weather's always going to be there one way or the other.
There's always weather. Yes.
And here we are talking about the weather, talking about not talking.
And here
about
we are talking about, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is this a meta conversation? I've heard about these meta conversations. I think this is a meta conversation. We're talking about not talking about it.
Oh, is that what a meta conversation is?
I don't really know.
Oh, neither do I.
I mean, I feel like I should know that. And I feel like I should. Yeah. But I think it's talking about something.
Oh, this is great. I love this actually. Yes, but I will be here for a few weeks, and next week's episode will actually be an update on all the animals and the progress and the growth. So I will not discuss that now. You know what I do want to talk about?
Tell me.
Something that happened in our Vegan Life Coach Academy's 8-week coaching program group.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. One of our clients, and I think you're going to know what I'm talking about. One of our clients had a birthday.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And she wrote the most amazing post about it.
Yeah.
Can you share?
Yeah. So this particular client is very new to our program. But she had talked about, it was her birthday, and she had talked about how she kind of struggles with her birthday every year. And she just kind of put out into the universe that she was worthy of basically celebration. I'm, of course, paraphrasing it. She was much more eloquent than I was, but she put it out in the universe, and she just got so much love back. And, every time she had that thought of being unworthy come back into her consciousness, she just really challenged it through the self-empowerment coaching system and had a really, really beautiful day. But, this has such larger implications than one day. Mm-hmm. This is really the start of something amazing for her because of the way she was able to challenge her thoughts. We can go into the law of attraction. We could talk on that for days, which I think is a very important point. However, I think what the real miracle of this all is that she is now designing her life thought by thought. And that is an amazing, amazing place to be in your life. And that's where you become truly empowered and truly in charge of what's going on in your, environment.
Yes. And if you don't know what we're talking about, when Stephanie said the self-empowerment coaching system, episode 7, you guys, actually, if you don't know about that, you might need to start at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Because, it all kinds of builds on each other, each episode. But episode 7 specifically is about the self-empowerment coaching system. And in kind of layman's terms, this client, was dreading her birthday, as she had been for many years. And she shared this process that she went through, coaching herself into having the most fantastic birthday she's had in a really long time, full of love and celebration. And I think I can only imagine so many of our listeners can relate to that. I mean, every year for me, it gets a little less special, that special day.
Right.
But ultimately, and I do like to think about it as celebrating, the day you were born into this world. It is a very special day. And I think that birthday should be celebrated for the parents as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have been telling my children that, especially this year. And I've been saying, I did all the work, really.
Yes.
You should be giving me gifts. And they say, but you have Mother's Day. And I'm like, that's not the day I did the work.
Right. I mean, you remember that day very clearly.
Yes, they do not.
They do not. Right. So I agree. I think there should be a little bit of a shift in who gets celebrated. I think it should be multi-pronged.
Yes. One of the traditions that I have that my kids really hate is that I tell them their birth story every single year.
Do you tell them every year?
Every year I tell them their birth story.
I know they got to roll their eyes at you.
Oh, they not just roll their eyes. They're like, oh, Mom, no, don't tell it. No, I don't want to know about that. And I'm like, oh, but it's so much fun.
I love that. Oh, I love that. All right. Well, we have quite the episode today. I'm really, really excited to share it with you. And actually, these folks were on Chef AJ as well. And I saw them on there and said, yeah, we got to get them here. And let me tell you a little bit about them. Sersie Blue, speaker and spiritual health coach, and Gigi Carter, licensed nutritionist and personal trainer, created Daniel Fast, a bridge to healthy living. This program was birthed during the pandemic to address the impact of comorbidities and the disproportionate number of COVID-19 deaths in the Black community. Sersie and Gigi co-authored a Prayer for Your Health journal, a 4-week journal combining faith and whole food, plant-based, vegan nutrition to guide women towards a plant-based lifestyle. We have a fascinating conversation full of so much gold and so many nuggets and things that people can relate to. So I'm excited to share.
Gigi and Sersie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm really excited to have you on to talk about your stories. They're so powerful. And then get into the Daniel Fast and what that's all about and the meaning behind it and just so much. There's so much here to uncover. So I'm excited to talk to you guys. Yeah. Who would like to start? I think we have to start with your stories.
Yeah, I'll start because Sersie's story is a great segue into the Daniel Fast because her story is connected to that. Spoiler alert! But so I can kick it off and just share my story. So my story actually started back in 2007 when I was 35 years old and I was diagnosed with high cholesterol. My physician did a carotid artery scan, which basically looks at your carotid artery in your neck, and it looks at the plaque that's building up in your neck, and they can discern based on that scan your the health of your body in terms of your age. So basically my physician said, you have the arteries of a 46-year-old, but I was only 35. And so, and I had high cholesterol. So of course they wanted to put me on a statin drug. And I basically just said, no, thank you. At the time I was just saying to myself, I'm 35, statin drugs are for older people, not, because it's an aging disease basically. And oftentimes, and so I just, politely refused and said, I know I needed to do something different, to take better care of myself, because at the time I was in a very high pressure corporate job, kind of working my way up the corporate ladder, and traveling a lot, eating a lot of rich food, eating at fancy restaurants and that sort of thing. And so I, basically said no. And around the same time, I learned about the work of Dr. Dean Ornish, who is a famous lifestyle medicine physician who did this it's called the Lifestyle Heart Trial. And he and his colleagues basically proved through an experimental study, which, so this is like an actual clinical trial where they showed that you could reverse heart disease without the use of medications. And it was purely with a whole food, plant-based vegan diet, along with some other lifestyle behavior changes like moderate exercise, love and support, like group support, and kind of stress management. So I knew what to do, right? So there's this knowing and doing gap that was going on, with me. And I remember saying when I learned of that I could never, give up cheese. I could never give up fish. I could, and so what I did was I did what I thought was the next best thing, which was I looked at the USDA guidelines, which told me what a healthy diet was. And so I ended up, kind of opting for things like low fat dairy and poultry instead of meat. So anyway, my cholesterol went from horrible to borderline bad and stayed there for about 5 years. And shortly after, around when I was 39, 40 years old, I was experimenting with a few cleanses. A friend of mine was doing this cleanse, and so I would do it with her or try to do it with her. And I had done the cleanse, on and off for over the course of a year. So I'd done it about 3 times. And what I learned was, I felt best when I was in the transition protocol. So you do this cleanse, right? And you just basically, it's a concoction of maple syrup, lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and water, something like that. And that's all you consume. You're supposed to do it for 10 days. I lasted 5 at the most. And then after you do this cleanse, you have this transition protocol, which was basically vegetable broth, fresh vegetables, and fruits. And you do that for a few days before you go back to your healthy diet. And so-called healthy diet, I should say. And so I had done that a few times, and I realized I felt best when I was in that transition diet, just eating vegetables and fruits. And so I remember coming off of vacation in 2012, and I said, I'm going to go vegetarian. There's something about, this thing of not eating meat that my body seems to appreciate and like. And I was still in a place where I was saying, I couldn't give up cheese. Cheese is always the last thing because it's addictive and whatnot, right? So I transitioned over the course of 6 months, and it started with, I would eat vegetarian, 2 days a week, then 3 days a week. And then I gradually increased that until after 6 months, I was saying, hey, I'm full vegetarian. So I was vegetarian for about a month. And then I watched 2 documentaries back to back. It was Earthlings and Forks Over Knives, like the same day, the same weekend, the same day. And I remember walking into my kitchen, and my husband was sitting there on his computer. I said, honey, I'm going vegan. And he said, okay, I'll do it too. And so to my delight, he agreed to do this with me, and that was it. I went vegan that day. And this was the middle of July 2012, and I've been whole food plant-based vegan ever since. What changed for me was my cholesterol went right into the normal, the healthy range, like very quickly within a matter of a month or two. I started losing excessive weight. I gained all this energy. I started cycling and ultimately bike racing at the age of 42 years old. And I'm still bike racing. I'm 50 years old, post-menopausal, yay
Yes.
for the post-menopausal. and, and I'm still bike racing. And what happened was, it changed my life so much that I ended up changing my career. After 22 years of working in corporate America, I decided to leave corporate America and go back to school. I earned a master's in nutrition sciences, became certified personal trainer, and basically, that was it. My career changed, my whole life changed, and for the better. And what I think about, why did it take me 5 years? I was on that fence for 5 years. And I tell people the only regret I have is not doing it sooner, because I was sitting on that fence for 5 years, because I had this limiting belief that if I stopped eating these foods, the quality of my life would go down, when in fact, the quality of my life increased exponentially. And so, I basically have devoted the rest of my life to helping other people take charge of their health, help them move towards a whole food, plant-based vegan diet. And that is my story. So I'm going to turn it over to Sersie, because she's going to share her story. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we met and created the Daniel Fast.
Yes. Sounds great. Yes. Oh, what a great story, Gigi. That's amazing. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, Sersie, let's hear it.
Yeah, so I'll jump into my story. My story started a little different. This was about 2010. I was in the last trimester of my second pregnancy, and the doctor diagnosed me with high blood pressure. And at the time, I didn't know that African-American women have higher rates of high blood pressure overall and even during pregnancy. But secondly, what I didn't know at the time was that those who have high blood pressure have a higher risk of having complications before, after, or even during your pregnancy. And so I was put on medication for that last trimester. And so when I actually went into labor, I actually had a complication, and my son lost oxygen to his brain. And so at this point, we had to do like 24-hour care, because his ability to actually drink for himself was kind of hindered because of the oxygen loss. And so there was a lot of different complexities that had to put into taking care of him for that whole year. And unfortunately, he ended up passing away a little bit after his first birthday. So you can imagine any mom, I was probably at my worst, in terms of just, I had a lot of family support, I will say that, and I had a lot of support, but in terms of that grief, you're kind of in that place of sadness and grief, and you're really not yourself. In terms of food-wise, you're kind of self-medicating with food. I've gained the most weight I've ever gained, and so I was in this, pit in some ways for a period of time. And I remember a friend just randomly, it was kind of out of the blue, she called me and she said to me, hey, why don't you do the Daniel fast with me? Now, I've done the Daniel fast before. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's actually a whole food plant-based diet, but what's written from it is that there's no processed sugars, no additives, no oils, no anything that kind of takes away from the whole food. So it's pretty much you're just eating real food for 30 days, but you're also entering into kind of devotional, kind of meditation, and that type of thing combined. And so she asked me, can you go ahead and do the Daniel fast with me? But at that point, sometimes you need the things in your life to kind of help you with the grief, like the foods that you're eating. And I remember saying, I'll do the Daniel fast with you, but I'm going to have to add cheese. I'm going to have to keep the eggs. And I kind of made this pseudo Daniel fast to her. And I remember it like it was yesterday. She said, listen, if you're going to do the Daniel fast, you got to do it exactly the way it's designed. And I just remember being so arrested in that moment. And I'm not even sure why, but I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. And from that moment, I did the Daniel fast for 30 days. And within that 30 days, my blood pressure was regulated. I had lost weight. I had spiritual and mental clarity. It was almost like blinders had come off, all because I kind of, not only was I doing my devotional and prayers, because I was always doing that all along and I had family support, but just by changing what I was actually putting in my mouth, the interconnectedness between my spirit and my physical emerged, and there was this wonderful transformation in terms of how I felt and my energy and even my depression, my sadness, my grief, all of that rolled into just became different. And I remember thinking to myself, was this an anomaly? Was I just this miracle that just happened? Or what is going on here? And so I started to do a lot of research. And like Gigi, I encountered, all of the studies that showed that a plant-based diet was the only one that actually can reverse chronic health issues. And then I started to dig deeper into the Bible. And like Dr. Greger says, one of the times he said, Daniel in the Bible was the first clinical trial for a plant-based diet. And so for those of you who don't know the story, I'll just say it very quickly. Daniel's in the Bible with his 3 friends, and they basically say, listen, we don't want to eat the king's diet, which is heavy on meat and wine and all that kind of stuff. Give us 10 days. We're only going to eat plants. And if we're not comparable to the other guys who are in training, then we'll go ahead and eat your diet. And what happens over those 10 days is not only were they comparable to their peers, but they superseded them. They were more healthy and wise and strong. And so they ended up being able to eat their diet. And so I started to research that. And I said to myself, so I ended up, like Gigi, changing my career to becoming a health coach and dedicating my life to help women make the connection between their food and their faith to ultimately get healthy. So that's my story.
Wow. Wow.
So a little, I'll share, Sersie, I hope you don't mind me sharing this. No. I just want to interject just something that's really interesting. So Sersie and I met in the middle of COVID. So we met virtually, I was in Washington State, I'm in Washington State, she's in Georgia. So about 3,000 miles apart. And where everyone's on lockdown. And so we meet because we had this shared connection around people with comorbidities dying at higher rates. And it was really adversely affecting, the Black and brown communities. And we just had this, as Sersie likes to say, radical empathy around this topic, because we're just like, we know what can really help people, is to reverse the chronic conditions and using, food as medicine to do that. And so I was on her podcast, and then she came on my YouTube channel. And so we created, basically what happened was Sersie wrote a blog article for me, and I was reading it, and I said, this would be a great program. So we just decided to collaborate and create this program, Daniel Fast, A Bridge to Healthy Living, really based on Sersie's story of using the Daniel Fast as a jumping off point for, a long-term healthy, sustainable lifestyle. For me, while, for me, what it was life-changing, because when I changed my life, I too had spiritual and mental clarity. And it was through all the prayer and meditation that I did that I decided to leave my corporate career and pivot my overall, kind of focus to helping people take charge of their health. So what was really fascinating about this was that fascinating is, that's probably the wrong word, probably divine. We'll just say there was a divine connection between us, because when Sersie lost her son, the day he passed away was my birthday.
Oh, wow.
In 2011, of all the days. Yeah. And here we are 3,000 miles apart, and we come together on this topic. And I later learned that he passed away on my birthday.
Wow. Yeah. I have chills all over. I'm sure you get that a lot from your story.
I mean, I still get a little watery eyed even when I say it out loud, and I've said it a few times, but it's just, it's a divine connection for sure. Yeah.
And I think for me, and I'm getting a little teary eyed, but I think for me, that was like a whisper from God that yes, you're on the right path. And so that's how I kind of interpreted it. So,
Yeah.
But yeah.
So amazing. Amazing. I want to go back to something you said, Gigi, about the gap between knowing and doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's so huge, especially in this day and age when the information really is more readily available, and sometimes almost too much information, right? It's overload. So the information's there. You don't have to really like seek it out as much as you used to. So what do you think that is, and how do you guide people in going from knowing to doing?
Yeah, so the term in kind of the behavior change psychology world is ambivalence. And so it's like you want to eat healthy and don't want to eat healthy at the same time, or you want to exercise, but then don't want to exercise at the same time. So it's whatever the behavior change involves. But what if it's something that if you really want to get off that fence, what has helped me and the people in our program, Daniel Fast, the Bridge to Healthy Living course, is that we focus very heavily on journaling. We focus on, that spiritual piece of bringing God into your health journey, and really using that to help you dig into what's keeping you on that fence. Because oftentimes this thing is based on a limiting belief. Like for me, my limiting belief was I associated success with eating at fancy restaurants and eating fancy food. That was my limiting belief. And even though I didn't consciously know that, it later revealed itself that was my limiting belief. But through journaling and through kind of the prayer and meditation and kind of the spiritual connectedness and understanding what your purpose is, you'll soon realize that you have no choice but to get healthy. And based on the science and the evidence, the best way to get healthy is to eat a whole food plant-based nutrition plan, because when you look at the evidence around the antioxidants, the phytochemicals found in whole plant food, the fiber, and you compare that to the oxidative stress and the pro-inflammatory substances that are contained in meat and other animal products, when you remove the bad stuff, the pro-inflammatory foods, and you add in the anti-inflammatory foods that are feeding you at a cellular and tissue level, you have no choice but to move towards that style of eating. And so the science supports that. We all know that. And so, like you said, the knowing and doing is really kind of stepping back and understanding what is that limiting belief, and how do I spiritually connect myself to my purpose, and see that realization that you can't really fulfill your purpose at the best level without being healthy.
Yeah. And the other thing, Ella, one of the things that we discovered in COVID, which I think if you look at most people, it's the same. When we looked at a study, we found that 80%, and this was just particular to Black women, but I think it transcends that. Whenever they made decisions in their lives, their faith was a very important factor. And so I think that's for everyone. When you think of America, our faith, our beliefs, our values, our core beliefs really impact the way we choose. We choose our spouse, our careers, where we live, how we function. But a lot of times we don't make that connection with how we live out our health. And so one of the things we really stress in the Daniel Fast Bridge to Healthy Living is, listen, you have to align your plate with your values. You have to align your plate with your faith and your beliefs and your core values. And once you do that, a synergy happens where the struggle decreases, and to the point where it becomes so embodied into who you are, your identity, your values, that you don't struggle on that fence anymore. I think a lot of times the reason why we're on that fence and we're struggling is because we haven't integrated our core beliefs with our health. And once we do that, Just like how we wouldn't go out and rob a bank, or we're not going to go. There's certain things that we're just not going to do. We're not tempted by that. Once we start integrating that into it, then the game changes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so interesting you said that. And I want to dive a little more into the purpose piece of this. But what you just said reminded me, and we talk a lot on this podcast about aligning your actions with your values. And in order to do that, you first need to identify your values. A lot of us haven't sat down and said, what really is, what do I value in this world?
Right.
So it's really interesting you said that. And for the animal people out there, for myself, for example, the ethical piece for me is so strong that, as you said, there's no temptation there, like none at all. But a lot of times people don't necessarily translate that when it's their own health and don't see that that's a value that they're not living in alignment with. So what do you think that's about? That, the people that are doing it for the animals, they can do it like without question. But when it comes to their own health and the health of people and their family, it's harder. What is that, do you think?
I think because they're not making the connections that we're animals too.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that's the disconnect. It's like we are seeing animals as something outside of ourselves, but we're actually all interconnected. We are animals too.
Yes.
And I think if we could view ourselves the same way that we view the animals, then we start integrating everything into it. We start integrating life and animals and ourselves and the planet. And there's no limit to the love and the inclusion that you can have. But you have to first realize that, wait a minute, I'm an animal too. How do I disconnect it? You know what I mean? And once you kind of really delve into that, wait a minute, why am I off the table, but every other animal's on the table? And I think if you put everything on there, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. And I think too, the purpose thing and understanding your purpose. So your purpose could be, you could be a mother or a grandmother or an accountant or a politician or a lawyer or whatever, a journalist. And when you think about how do you do that to the best of your ability at the highest frequency, and you really start to dissect that you have to come back to your health. You have to come back to self-care. And part of self-care is changing your nutrition, looking at what's at the end of your fork. And really, and Sersie gives a great lecture in the course about bringing faith to the kitchen table and the power of saying grace. And what are you saying grace over? And where the food comes from? How did it get to your plate? And really making that connection. When you start looking at that, more holistically around your purpose and your, like we talked about, values, and then kind of how you're bringing that into your body, into your life. You can't, the cognitive dissonance starts to kind of dissipate,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you need to be Christian to do the Daniel fast?
No, you don't have to be Christian. No. Yeah.
Is so what for somebody like myself who's spiritual, I don't necessarily read the Bible so much. Would there be a difference of how I do it and what I get from it than somebody who is more aligned with Christianity?
I think what you would get from it is if you value spiritual truths. And I think that's the key, because what we talk about in there, it is Christian based. And of course, if you're Christian, you're going to have more of a comfort level because you're familiar with these stories. But if you're somebody who's not Christian, this is the first time I've ever heard this story from the Bible. It's whether or not you're open to spiritual truths and spiritual, applications. And so I think anybody is. And I think that's what makes even the Bible such a transcendent book, because it has so many spiritual truths and stories that we all can apply to our lives.
Yeah. And I will also say we have had a few, and I say this affectionately, junk food vegans in our course who are not necessarily like quote unquote Christians, but spiritual. And so they have gone through the program, just to go through the process of, eliminating the processed vegan foods and replacing it with more whole, nutrient dense plant foods. And during the time you're abstaining from alcohol, you're abstaining from those things that, kind of slow us down and sap our energy and attention. So it is a form of a cleanse without the maple syrup, cayenne, lemon juice. It's just whole plant foods.
Yeah.
Gigi,
it brings you back to real food, basically.
Yeah. Gigi, I did that master cleanse when I was in my 20s. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I made it 5 days as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. The water, lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup. That was it. Yep. Good old master cleanse. Oh boy. Okay. Question about the health disparities in this country, specifically between people of color and white people. Is that something that you have done a lot of research on? Is that something you incorporate into the work that you're doing to reach out to the people most in need?
Yes, definitely. We definitely, I think that is what sparked the creation of the program to begin with, because like we said, we had this radical empathy for people with comorbidities. But yes, it definitely gears towards that, because it's giving an alternative. And like I said, because of the fact that when we did the studies, we realized that Black women, 80% of them make their decisions based on their faith. We felt that this was an untapped area to help people to use the superpower that they've always been using, but now to integrate it into their health.
Right. Yeah. So with the program, we have a collection of both free resources and then some paid. So we've got the Facebook group, which is totally free. And we have we do challenges. This week, we have a half your plate veggies challenge. We've done exercise challenges, fruit challenges. We also do a monthly prayer for your health and a monthly, what we call cook and chat girls night in. We launched danielsplate.com, which is our whole food plant-based vegan recipe website. And then we also have a free 4-day Daniel Fast challenge. And it's very structured in that we give everyone a guide. And it includes like devotionals and some scripture readings, as well as some nutritional information that includes things like a sample meal plan in terms of what to eat, for the 4 days. And some guidance in terms of, weaning yourself off of caffeine and, all of that. And then, so we've got a ton of like free resources for people, who maybe have some income limitations, but for those that, want to dive deeper, into the program, we do have a paid course. Oh, I forgot to mention, we do have a Prayer for Your Health journal that's available at Amazon for $18. So if somebody goes through the 4-day program, they can buy the book to continue, through the 4 weeks following the 4 days, or they can jump into our 4-week course, which is basically Sersie and I going live every week, providing coaching support and answering questions. And it's kind of a community, like a small, kind of, I wouldn't say a small group, but it's kind of a group community where, the group holds each other accountable and gets ideas from each other and provides each other support. And so we offer that as well. So, that's kind of how we've approached it. And we've got a blog with a ton of information about the digital fast. We've answered pretty much every question on Google about the
Yeah. And we just launched a podcast called Healthy for My Purpose. And so people who want to listen to that, we come with stuff with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. We'll put the links to all of those in the show notes as well. Gigi, I have to ask you, because I heard you say this and I'm not sure on where, but you talked about your dad running with Malcolm X. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. So my dad grew up Baptist, and I can remember him telling me when I was younger, he hated going to church because he said it was pray, pay, and obey, or something like that. Like it was always like they were always asking for money. Like, so he was really kind of disenfranchised with the church he was attending, and it was in the height of the civil rights movement. And so he decided that he wanted to explore, Islam, teachings and Muslim. And so he decided to start following Malcolm X. And he told me, he said, you know what? He said, he told me this, but long before he passed away, but he said, Gigi, I remember saying I'd never marry a white woman. And then he said, until I met your mother. So they got married, and they were, married until he passed away, of course. And then, but we did find a church home, a Methodist church here in Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up. And so we would go to church, somewhat regularly. I mean, I wouldn't say we were there every single Sunday, but we went quite a bit and did some volunteer work there too. So, yeah.
So cool. I love that. Okay. What about some stories? Do you have any stories of people that have done your fast that have gotten a lot out of it?
Yeah, I'll mention a few. And we highlight quite a few testimonies on our website, danielfasttohealthyliving.com. And I'll just mention one. Our client, one of the people that went through the course, her name is Marie, and she's 70 years old. And she joined the program because she had been a longtime vegetarian. So this is someone who has abstained from meat for long periods of times, but still eating, eggs and dairy and that sort of thing. And she basically has lost a ton of weight. She describes it as she has three sections in her closet: her heavy weight, her medium weight, and her healthy Marie weight clothes. And she is well into her healthy Marie weight clothes. And she said she has had so much fun getting into those clothes again because of the weight loss that she's experienced on the program. And what she's really loved about it has been that she doesn't feel like she's been limited to it. Like there's so much out there. There's so much to eat. I've never, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. I'm full all the time, and she's still losing weight, and she's, super active. She started running at 70 years old. So
wow.
she's calling her, she's a full-on runner now. So I would say she's definitely a success story. And then what I love to hear is that her husband, who didn't go through the program, is picking up little nuggets of goodness in his life as well. And so he's eating, more whole plant foods as well, and getting some benefit from that. So it kind of has this carryover effect.
Yeah.
Now, well, here's my question too. How confident is she that she's going to stay in her healthy weight clothes? And how do you support people once they've done the 30 days so that they can get rid of those heavy clothes, knowing that they're going to stay at a healthy weight?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's because when people sign up for our course, they have it for life. And because we do this live program 3 times a year, and when I say 3 times, it's like 3 chunks of time throughout the year. So it's basically like in January, we'll be going live with the group for, basically 5 Sundays. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll pick it back up kind of April, May timeframe for 5 Sundays. And then we'll pick it back up again in the fall. So when you have the course for life, if you slip and you need to get back on, you obviously have the Facebook group and the challenges that you do there, but you also get back into the course because you have it for life, and you get back on the group calls. And so what we're finding is that, there's some people who can go through the course, do the group calls, and then they're cool. They're like, I'm running with this. I get it. And then you have other people that like that continuous accountability to stay at it. Because once this, Ella, like once you start eating this way and what good feels like, you have a data point in your mind of what it used to be like versus what it is now. And when we get to that point, you don't want to go back to that. You don't want to go back to feeling the way you used to feel. And so that is usually the thing that gets people, to stick with it. They have that mental data point of, gee, I lost this weight, I had more energy, I was able to keep up with my grandkids better. I was able to do more than I used to be able to do. I started doing this. Why would I want to go back? And we've got examples of people who slipped during the holidays and immediately went back. They had no problem getting back. So, yeah.
Awesome. Sersie, have you connected with other people that maybe your story has resonated with them, who have come into the program and they've had also some loss that they're dealing with? And has that come into the program at all?
Yeah. I've had people who've had trauma or some sorts of things, who made the connection between their addiction to food and maybe like a traumatic experience, or even just their own self-image and their own self-worth. And so we've had people who are making those connections that, wait a minute, I'm eating, but there's something deeper here that's going on. And that's some of the stuff that we really dig deep into the course to really unravel some of the issues of why we're eating and why we're so attached to these foods, and how we can pull away from them.
Yeah. 30 days is such a great period of time. Like a 5-day master cleanse is not going to have any long-term results, but
exactly. And I think that's why we decided to do the 4-day, because we realized anyone could do anything for 4 days, to give them a little nudge to say, listen, if you do it for 30 days and go all in and take, what do we call it? We take, what's the word I'm looking of? We take
moderation.
Take moderation off the table, because I think a lot of times what happens is when we try to get healthy little by little, we're okay, I'm going to eat healthy only in the evenings, but then I'm going to eat my chocolate in the morning, or what happens is we're doing this and we never get to feel that full sense of, wow, I feel really great. And that's that's the hook. And so if you keep jostling back and forth, and this is why we call it a bridge to healthy living, and we encourage people jump into the 4 weeks, because it gives you a reference point. It allows you to know what good feels like, but you have to take moderation off the table. You can't put a little bit of the list. You have to just go all in so that you can get that experience and be able to, that will be your anchor. Because now you know what you're going back to, rather than kind of feeling good today and then going back bad, and then you never really get that full experience.
Is it the faith and spirituality aspect that can also help people, because they're going to have cravings, right? Like these are food addictions. Do you find that piece of it is really instrumental in helping you have the cravings, but then still stick with it?
Exactly. One of the lectures that we have in there is your faith is greater than your appetite. And so a lot of it is what makes this program so unique, is that we're allowing people to tap into their spirituality, their faith, the thing that is guiding them throughout their entire lives, and now channel that into, wait a minute, I could, and I know it sounds simplistic, but I can pray about just not eating that cake, or I could, in a moment, kind of sit still and say, you know what, God, what is this about? Why do I want this so badly, even though I know it's damaging my body? And being able to connect in those moments, even around our food, because a lot of times we say that we can't spiritualize our food because we eat it breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's become so mundane, but food is killing us and food is harming us. And so we have to be able to look at it in spiritual eyes, like we do with anything else that may be harming us in our lives.
Yeah. And I would also say the group support and accountability is very powerful, because when we talk about, what went well this past week, what are your challenges and struggles, and what you're the question you asked does come up around cravings. It helps people in the group to know, one, they're not alone, and two, they've got the support of the people around them to help them get through it. And then sometimes we come up with different tips on how to subside the cravings or replace it with something else. When there's some people think things like melon, or fruit is bad for you because it has so much quote unquote sugar in it, and so we dispel some of those myths, which could also be a substitute for someone who might have a sweet tooth, but I thought, mango is bad for me because it has sugar in it. And it's like, no, mango is wonderful.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's why we couldn't run from the food, because no matter what, people want to replace the old food with something comparable. And this is why we developed danielsplate.com, basically just to say, listen, you could still eat well and have all the delicious flavors and everything and not have to compromise using real food. And so that was what our whole goal was for Daniel's Plate, because we felt like no matter what, we cannot get away from the food. Everybody wants great tasting food. It doesn't matter how you break it down. If this is not good for you, they want comparables. And so that was the heart of Daniel's Plate.
You crave ice cream, we've got a banana and ice cream.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about being still for a moment, because I think in this day and age, I mean, we're just running, busy. We don't pause and know that just because you have a craving doesn't mean you have to act on it.
Right.
Exactly. But having that extra guidance from above is helpful.
It's helpful.
Oh, I love that. You guys are awesome. I just adore you and your stories and what you're doing. And we're going to put the show notes in the show notes, we're going to put your website, your Facebook group link, the Daniel Plate link. So we're going to put it all there for people to get in touch. Anything else you want to add that we haven't mentioned yet today?
I would say if you're listening to this and you're getting kind of hints all around you that, there's a lifestyle change that you need to make, don't wait. Don't wait any longer. Start today. Let the next thing that you eat be something that edifies your body and your mind and your spirit. And don't sit on that fence like I did for 5 years.
Yeah.
Time's ticking.
Time's ticking. Because they say it's never too late until it's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
exactly.
true.
Don't wait till a health crisis happens.
Right.
That's it.
Oh, well, thank you guys for taking the time and energy to be here and sharing with our audience. Best of luck with everything. I'm sure we'll be back in touch soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.